And what this shows is all of the rumours and fears that people had after having Jenner's treatment. And those rumours and fears were that you might have all of these side effects that made you similar to a cow, all of these bovine characteristics. Hello, I'm Alice Loxton and welcome to the 4th episode of my History Extra Academy series, The World of the Georgians, where I explore some of the art and satire that poked, prodded and outright mocked Georgian society. Today we'll be looking at healthcare in the 18th century, where the line between cure and quackery was often blurred. Our story begins inside the Georgian household. Here, the medicine chest was an essential. In wealthy homes where families could afford medical concoctions, housewives and housekeepers were expected to know their way around a recipe book, not for cakes, but for preparing cures, just in case anyone in the family was struck down with a headache or perhaps something much worse. Many of these remedies were made from herbs like rosemary, angelica and lavender, plants that still appear in herbal medicine today. But alongside these home-brewed concoctions came ready-made cures from the apothecary, with a thriving trade in exotic spices and ingredients shipped in from far-flung corners of the globe. Yet, as ever, it was wise to be cautious. This marketplace was a magnet for charlatans and opportunists. Some entrepreneurs were especially adept at exploiting the public's desire for easy cures. Among the most notorious were Elisha and Benjamin Perkins, two Americans who convinced an alarming proportion of polite society that their medical invention could cure practically everything, from rheumatism to gout to toothache and sprains. It was something that didn't go unnoticed by the notorious satirist James Gillray. So this is one of my favourite images created by James Gillray, and it shows one of the biggest medical scams of the day. So Elisha and Benjamin Perkins, they came up with this treatment, which was totally false. We know today it didn't do anything, but it was these metallic tractors, so these 3-inch long metal rods. And what they would do is they would apply the metal rods to an area of pain, and they would zap some electricity through it. This was celebrated by medical experts at the time for its restorative powers. And perhaps you can see why people thought it might do something in an age where most people were still using herbal medicines or gathering herbs from their local area. And here we see Elisha Perkins applying the metallic tractors to this patient, or should we say victim. There's a quote which gives a good explanation of how these worked. This is from a contemporary journal, and it regards Gillray's image. As soon as the surgical prospector begins to use his diving rod on this rich copper mine, a powerful tremor shakes the whole mountain of flesh and fat like an earthquake. Bright sparks tackle and spread out in electrical showers the nose and nostrils. So gives an impression of the drama of the application, I suppose. But what's interesting about this perhaps is the social history here. You know, this is a day-to-day scene for ordinary Britons. So of course we've got the dog, we've got this table, the true Briton, we've got the decanter here, and I love the expressions of these figures. So first we've got the doctor with this incredibly focused face, the furrowed brow. You can see he's got one of the metallic tractors in his mouth, holding it while he's applying another. And even look at his hair at the back sticking out that way. And you can even get a sense of his shoulders being lifted up tight as he's focused. And then in complete opposite, we've got the poor patient here. You can see his knees are close together. He's really tense. He's got his hands tense like this. Perhaps if you've ever been to the dentist and they're operating on you, you can imagine being in this kind of emotive state. You can imagine being tense like this. and his eyes are wide and shocked by what's being applied to him. His eyebrows are raised, his wig's fallen off, and it's all an expression of shock and total uncertainty about what's going on. And then finally, the little dog looking up in total bemusement. But Georgian medicine wasn't all hocus pocus. Genuine scientific advancements were being made too, and one notable step forward was in the field of vaccination. In the late 18th century, a physician called Dr. Edward Jenner heard a story suggesting that milkmaids who caught cowpox, a mild viral infection passed from cows, never went on to suffer smallpox, one of the deadliest diseases of the age. In 1796, Jenner decided to put the story to the test. He took matter from a cowpox sore and rubbed it into the arm of James Phipps, the 8-year-old son of his gardener. Phipps had never contracted cowpox or smallpox, but after this process, he was immune to both. It was an astonishing discovery, and it was this process that gave us the word vaccination, vacca being the word for cow. But of course, all of this was not without controversy. Some condemned it as blasphemy, while others were horrified at the idea of mixing animal matter with the human body. Dr. Benjamin Moseley, a prominent physician, even launched a campaign of misinformation, inventing absurd maladies like cowpox face and cowpox itch to discredit the practice. The satirist James Gillray, never one to let a public scandal go unmocked, immortalised the debate in his famous cartoon The Cowpox, or The Wonderful Effects of the New Inoculation. His caricature gleefully exaggerated fears of what could occur after receiving Jenner's treatment. Let's have a closer look. Here we have an image where Gillray has imagined the scenes where Jenner's new treatment has been applied to the general population. So here we can see Dr. Jenner in the middle here, and around him are all of these figures who are either queuing up to be given the treatment or have just received the treatment. And you can see this figure here holds the vaccine pot from the cow, and Jenner is cutting at this woman's arm, who she looks pretty unsure sitting on this chair here. It's a completely farcical scene and definitely not created with medical know-how. But this is the brilliance of Gillray. You know, he's creating these quite surreal, fun images to entertain people. This would have been an image that would have been in the print shop windows, and people would be walking along the streets in London and finding these very amusing. And what this shows is all of the rumours and fears that people had after having Jenner's treatment. And those rumours and fears were that you might have all of these side effects that made you similar to a cow, all of these bovine characteristics. And we can see some of these here. So this figure here has little cows jumping out of his arms, jumping from his legs. We've got this man who's actually grown some horns. This lady's got a cow jumping from her mouth. This one from her nose, this one from his ear. So what's the message Gillray's saying here? Well, imagine if this kind of thing was happening today. Imagine if people were fearful of having bovine characteristics. You can imagine the conversations in the pubs. You can imagine comedians on TV making jokes about it. You can imagine the silliness that would surround that. And that's actually what Gillray has captured here. He's captured those jokes and he's captured those memes in this image. But he's also ridiculing it. Next time, I'll be exploring the Georgian obsession with appearance and how caricature cut it down to size.